Good evening, everybody. Viewers online, I just want to make sure that you can hear me well. Can you give us a thumbs up or put something in the chat room, please? Wonderful. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Well, welcome to our In Conversation series regarding from the Resiliency Coalition. Tonight, we are talking about survivors. And these can be survivors from any type of a traumatic event, be it sexual assault, be it an assault of any type. During our event tonight, we have some guest speakers with us. I am going to announce. So normally we would have Erin here, but Susie is in place for Erin because Erin actually has job duties to do tonight unexpectedly. And Susie is from, I always want to say Blessings. New Beginnings APFV, as well as Stephanie is from New Beginnings APFV. Then we have Amy, who is from Walworth County District Attorney's Office as the Victim Witness Coordinator. Then we do have a special guest, Lynn, who will share her story about survivorship and how she overcame. Then we have Darylyn talking to us from Mercy for Behavioral Health. And we do have another spot where right now it doesn't appear that anybody's there, but her name is Kathy. She is a SANE nurse from Aurora, and she is also at her job right now unexpectedly. So we have some very fantastic, driven people that are dedicated to their positions that are even taking them away as they are here for your support. So we are going to start with Susie tonight. One thing that I would like to share, if you have questions, please raise your hand as we go. Put them in the chat room. We do want to make this an interactive event. We are here for you and show resources that are out there. And this is what these folks are going to be doing up here, is having in conversation as well. We want to break down the stigmas of talking about trauma and talking about being a victim and how to go about surviving through all of this. So please don't hold back. This is a safe place. And we are ready to start. So Susie, it is all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay. So like Senta said, I am Susie from New Beginnings. Erin, who is our child and teen advocate, was due here and sadly was called to assist and advocate for a 3-year-old sexual assault victim. So us being here tonight is very important. I thanked Senta before we started because this stuff is happening here in our neighborhoods, in our communities. And so I just think it's really important that you're all here. So thank you for that. And again, thank you, Senta, for doing this. New Beginnings, we're entering our 43rd year serving Walworth County. We started out back in 1978 as a DV, or domestic violence organization. And in 2001, we added sexual assault as one of our core services. In 2012 and 2017, between 2012 and 2017, we also added harassment, stalking, and human trafficking. As Senta mentioned, we used to be known as APFV, which was Association for the Prevention of Family Violence. And we changed our name in 2018, and we are now New Beginnings. But we kept the APFV just so we would be known. And a lot of people in the community still refer to us as APFV. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. In February. Oh, there is. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Excuse me, everybody. Thank you. In February of 2020, we moved offices from Wisconsin Street, where we had been for about 7 or 8 years, and we moved to 20 North Church Street. And we are thrilled, and that's where we're currently locating. We're thrilled to be there. Sexual Assault Month is April, and sexual assault is the most personal assault that there is. And it doesn't happen to just adults, it happens to children and teens too. In just 3 months into the year 2021, we've already served 93 sexual assault victims just through our office alone in Walworth and Whitewater. This does not count additional victims that we've worked with who are also dual, which is domestic violence and sexual assault. So those numbers are pretty staggering. Many think that sexual assault would never happen to them, and it's more common than you think, especially between children and teens. I apologize for this. According to RAINN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest, and National Network, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse, and typically that's at the hand of an adult, and typically that adult is somebody that they know. Now we're faced with an even bigger problem, social media. So social media, there are so many apps that parents aren't even aware of. One is Omegle. I don't know if anyone here has heard of Omegle, but it is one of the newest apps, and the kids are getting on this app, and the app on your phone or on your computer, your laptop, it looks like a gamer's app. So parents walk by and they say, oh, the kid's on Omegle again. And it's actually an app used by traffickers. And we're actually currently working with 3 girls that are 12 and 11 years old who were involved with trafficking through this site, Omegle. So it's very important that parents keep an eye on their kids, and that kids, you know what you're getting into, because some of these apps that seem harmless are not harmless at all. Sexual jokes and rape jokes and victim blaming comments may seem not to be a very big deal, but they contribute to some of the thinking of that fuels the real violence that we see every day. Thanks to the Me Too movement, a lot of people have become more aware how important this is and how serious it is. And that is really changing, and that's wonderful. We love to hear and see that. In 2016, Netflix had an original documentary. It's called Daisy, Audrey and Daisy. And one of my favorite lines, it's probably going to be one of my all-time favorite lines, but one of my favorite lines that Daisy ends the documentary with is, the words of our enemies is not as awful as the silence of our friends. And in this documentary, the girls talk about how they, without their consent, they were sexually assaulted by teenage boys their age at parties under the influence. The girls were under the influence. And their friends that were at the parties knew about the assaults, and they kept quiet because they didn't want the school was divided, and they didn't want that division. And so the end of that documentary is so meaningful, and she ended it with that. And so for the kids that are here listening, I think it's so important that if you see something, to say something. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read some of Erin's notes here. I don't want to miss anything that was important. That is all that we've got here. I'd like to introduce Stephanie. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephanie. I'm a special crimes victim advocate and housing specialist with New Beginnings. Passionate about helping people, victims of violent crimes, as they heal and navigate through this legal system. I think it's important that the victims are supported and connected to services they need in order to heal and to work through the trauma they've suffered. Being an advocate with New Beginnings really has given me an opportunity to encourage and help empower victims to become survivors. One of the services that we offer at New Beginnings is the ability to have an advocate with them after they've experienced a sexual assault. There's a SANE program at the local hospital here. And with having advocates here in the community, it gives them an opportunity to have somebody there during their sexual assault nursing exam, also known as SANE. And we're there basically just to comfort, support the survivors as they tell their stories. Because again, it's such a traumatic experience, and then here they are having to tell it again. So with an advocate there, we're there to support and they don't feel alone. We also assist and accompany the survivors to law enforcement interviews, to legal proceedings, whether that be court or interviews with the DA's office. We're there through the whole process with them and the healing. We also run sexual assault support groups where survivors are able to share their story in a safe and supportive environment. We also offer individual crisis counseling for survivors, both virtually and in person. And I think our goal here is really just to provide that awareness, especially this month being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, to the community and to the survivors to know that these services are available and they are free, and they're available here in the community. And just a reminder that again, our services are free. The crisis counseling is for individuals. We have a lot of other services. Like Susie had mentioned, the domestic violence. We help those who are affected by harassment and stalking as well. We are also have a crisis line for after hours. So our business hours are 8 to 4:30, but after hours, if you call our office, you can leave a general message or you can have the option to connect to crisis. So you're never alone. There's always somebody there to support you. And then for those who don't know, April, we also have Denim Day. And what Denim Day is it grew out of 1998 Italian Supreme Court decision that was overturned because, they overturned a rape conviction because the victim wore tight jeans. This 18-year-old young girl was picked up by her then 45-year-old driving instructor, and she'd gone out for her first driving lesson, and he took her to an isolated road. They pulled over. He wrestled her out of one leg of her jeans and forcibly raped her. And then he threatened her with death if she told anyone, and he made her drive home. Later that night, she did tell her parents, and they helped and supported her as she reported the event and pressed charges. The perpetrator was arrested and prosecuted, and he was convicted of rape and sentenced to jail. However, he appealed the sentence, and this case made it all the way to the Italian Supreme Court, and within a matter of days, the case against the driving instructor was overturned, and they dismissed all charges. He was released, and in a statement by the chief judge, he argued because the victim wore very, very tight jeans, she'd had to have helped him remove them, and by removing the jeans, it was no longer rape, but considered consensual sex. Enraged by the verdict, within a matter of hours, women in the Italian parliament launched into immediate action and protested by wearing jeans to work. People all over the world were outraged and wore jeans because as making it an international symbol of protest against the destructive attitudes and myths surrounding the sexual assault. So this year, Denim Day is on April 28th. So we encourage everyone here in the community to show your support for sexual assault awareness by wearing your jeans on April 28th. Thank you. So I'm gonna pass. Yes.
So that's April 28th?
Yes, April 28th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to pass it now over to Amy.
Well, there I am. Okay, sorry. Technology is not my friend some days. Thank you. First, I have to say right off the bat that my job would be so much more difficult if I did not have an organization like New Beginnings right there with me. I mean, community support is so important. And I cannot tell you how many times I've shot off an email to one of the many ladies over in New Beginnings saying, hey, I got someone here that needs somebody, and you are more qualified than I am. Because what I do at the district attorney's office is I'm the victim witness coordinator, and I help victims navigate the whole legal process. I'm not a therapist or a counselor, but I do play one sometimes when someone calls in. But if it goes beyond what I can do, if it goes beyond a mom talking to a 20-year-old girl, that's when I call in the big guns at New Beginnings, and they are phenomenal. And if you ever need somebody to talk to, you call them. You can call me too, but call them if you need some therapy and some counseling and just some answers and some help and some guidance. We're all there to help sexual assault victims and any victim navigate this whole process. So the court system can be tricky and confusing and baffling and just scary. And everybody recognizes that. It's not just scary for the 16-year-old victim. It's scary for police officers. I've seen cops cry on the stand. It's okay. It happens. But I'm there to guide you through that whole process, not just the court process, but when a crime is referred for charges, during the whole court proceedings, trial, sentencing, conviction, all of that. I'm your girl. I'm right next to you. I'm not leaving your side. And I can be a little annoying about that, but I do my best to see what you need as a victim, and I help you as much as I can. Now, shout out to the state of Wisconsin. We're the first ones to have the Bill of Rights for victims. Yay. 1980 that was. Doesn't seem that long ago to me, but apparently it is. 1980 is not that long ago, but it's a really important part of the process. It gives victims rights, and it explains what their rights are. And I'm the person, and my partner Christy at the district attorney's office, we're the ones that make sure they are enforced, protected. We make sure your voice is heard. Because one of the most important things, there's a couple that are really, really near and dear to my heart, but one of the most important ones is your right to be heard. Because it's important. It's an important part of the process of healing, of recovery, of just handling the whole thing, is to be able to know that if you want, you can say what you need to say. Sentencing hearings can be the most emotionally taxing, exhausting, and fulfilling hearings I've ever been to. I've seen young ladies, 14, 15, get up and face their accuser, say what they need to say, and just the back's a little straighter, the breathing's a little calmer, and you can just kind of see it wash over them. I'm not doing anything what I wrote. That's amazing. But it's just really important. It's an important part of the process. It's vital, I think, to the process of starting to heal and recover and turning something that's so horrible into something that encourages them to go on the path of recovery. And and I think the next speaker, which we'll get to in a minute here, she can testify to that, about the importance of victim impact statements. So the other thing I want to say is this all works better if a victim has the support of not just their family, but obviously for their family, but with their friends, with their coworkers, with their classmates. Because one of the most primary things that is a big concern of mine is that a victim will report something and be shamed and bullied and pointed at and asked, well, what did you do? I know this guy, he's a great guy. What did you do? I hear this all the time. I've seen girls have to change schools, and it's not just girls, it's boys too. But I've seen kids have to change schools, to leave town. I've seen that a few times. And it's not right. And it sometimes feels like that's their only choice, but it's not. And it's just for the community to be aware of that, to address it, to recognize it, for the schools to address it and recognize it is really key. And I hope that as we have these conversations, that starts to become a more common conversation of not letting someone get away with, the bullying and the shaming, especially these days of technology, because it's so easy to sit and clickety clack on your computer and sit in your nice little cozy bedroom and nobody knows, what's going on. So it's a problem. It needs to be addressed. And I know that with the community support, we'll continue to address that. It's hard to ask victims to handle all this. It's asking a lot. They have to dig deep and be brave. But, as I've said to so many people just before they walk up to the stand, I say, I know you can do this. You are strong. You can do anything for just this time. Just do this minute, just this time. Get up there and say what you need to say, tell the truth, and then we'll move on past that. We have a little message in our victim waiting room. And my coworker, Christy, put it on there just for one specific girl. And I thought, this is amazing. I'm never erasing this. It says, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. As a community, I just want all the victims to know that we will support you. We will listen to you. And I will make sure that you are heard, because the judges really do take victims seriously in our county. Shout out to our county again. Our judges are really cognizant of what victims have to say. And I've seen it make a big difference in hearings. And even if it's just regular hearings, status hearings, they're very aware of what victims need to start that process of survival. Okay, so speaking of survivors, I have an amazing new friend, Lynn, here next to me. And she's going to talk about her personal experiences. Wait, how do I mute myself? There we go.
My name is Lynn, and everything that they have said is so true. I needed them. I needed them in my journey from when I was assaulted. On June 1st of 2017, I was involved in an attempted murder, sexual assault, and rape on me by a stalker. I woke up to him standing over me. He had leather gloves on, he had a white mask, and he had a gun to my head. He flipped me over and he zip tied me, and I was screaming bloody murder. But nobody could hear because he had those thick gloves on. And my son and my dog were sleeping upstairs. And at that point, I realized that if I would scream any louder, they would come down and he would kill my son. So now I was in protective mode. So I'm trying to deal with this person hurting me, brutally raping me, throwing me around like a rag doll, and trying to protect my son. So I decided during all of this that I was going to ask him questions. I was going to make him look at me as human and not a piece of meat. So I asked him, are you married? Flipping bitch wife. Do you have any kids? 8-year-old son. So I was trying to get him to trust me while he was hurting me. This went on for a long time. He was there for hours. And at one point I said, I'm so thirsty. Can I have something to drink? So he lifted me up like that rag doll, and he tipped my head back and he poured beer in my throat, and I couldn't breathe. I was choking on this beer. And once I could talk, I said, what is that? Pabst? He goes, no, Spotted Cow. So here I'm getting evidence, not realizing I was getting evidence. So that helped in the investigation. This went on for a long time, rape. I'm not going to go into details, but it started to get light out. So now you could tell he was getting a little scared. And he decided to get dressed, but he pushed me on the bed, so my face was forward. And I'm still tied up, my arms, my legs behind my back. And now he wanted to steal from me. So he decided to run around the house. He found my jewelry, my money, my clothes, and then he decided he was going to leave. So he put the gun to my head and he says, "You call the effing cops." He says, "You're dead. I have a surveillance camera on your house and you're going to be dead." So at this point, I didn't say anything. I kind of let him just do what he had to do. And he left, at least I thought he did. And I wormed my way off the bed and I tied up still. And I went up 15 to 20 stairs, being tied up, naked, opening the door with my elbow to tell my son. I said, Luke, I was raped. I was raped. And to see the sadness in his eyes was heart-wrenching. He got up. He ran down the stairs, and I told him to please be safe. And he locked the doors, and he got scissors to cut me free. As he helped me up, then we went down the stairs, and now we're discussing if we were going to call the police or not. And I didn't want to because he threatened he was going to kill me. But we decided that that was the best thing to do, was to call the police. And we did. And then the police came. And then the investigation started. And they were there for a long time. And then I went, the sheriff department brought me to the hospital. And I went and I met with an advocate and a SANE nurse. And the police were there, and like everything, question after question after question. And I was traumatized. It was so hard. It's like you don't remember a lot of the things that they asked you. But so then I was there for a long time, and then I came home, and that's basically it for the assault. 2 weeks later, he tried to hire a hitman to kill me. So then I was in protective custody for 10 days. So then that's it about the assault, and there's just so much more to talk about. But I can go into the triggers that I had. Triggers that I had through the assault were the white masks. I can't handle cigarette smoke. I can't go into a Home Depot and see zip ties on display. Dark, I can't. It's very hard to be in a room that it's dark. I always have to sleep with a nightlight, and that's still to this day. People who stare at me, sometimes I just wonder if they're looking at me because they want to hurt me. So that stuff is all pretty scary. Driving past my house, that's a tough one too. The alarm system that I ended up getting, that went off when we had the hitman, and that totally traumatized me. But after all of that, we went through the process of counseling and going through all of the going through just learning to live after this assault. And now it was time to go to we had to write a letter to the judge to let him know how it impacted me. And this is before the trial. So I would like to read that to you if I could. It's pretty long. So my life has forever changed on June 1st, 2017, when Michael Burke broke into my home, a place that should be safe, a haven from the world. Instead, it became a place of violence and fear while he brutally sexually assaulted me, invading the very place of peace for myself and those I love, transforming a place for life and family into ever-present reminder of the evil that exists in the world. My everyday world has changed. I no longer sleep. I have nightmares. I have to lock my bedroom door and keep my lights on to even attempt to disconnect and rest. It is not possible. My son has had to sleep near me with our dog as a layer of protection, and yet, even then, I feared for them and could not close my eyes for thoughts of what happened to me, to them in our home. I cannot sleep on the same side of the bed. My eyes open throughout the night, peering into the darkness, listening, wonder if all is well. I cannot look out windows, wondering if somebody is looking back at me, watching. When I leave my home for the briefest amount of time, I prepare the house, lights on, blinds closed, assuring there is no hiding places for my return. Even my dog has changed. I worry leaving him at home alone. He has become mean, biting at times, does not like men, and is reactive. His personality has changed, and that joy at life is now vigilance. He stares out the window at police cars, knowing. I no longer listen to music in my home. I have to hear if somebody is trying to come in, and also there is no lightness in which the music enters my days. I cannot focus or tune out the world. I am constantly on high alert, and everyday experiences trigger horrific memories. Going into a hardware store and seeing zip ties on display, smelling cigarette smoke while giving hugs to friends I know, masks on children during Halloween. All of this takes me to dark places and images of what he did to me. I feel unsafe. I'm scared of people now. Every step I take, I'm alert and awake, watchful of all around me. I no longer venture out on my own in new locations. I carry pepper spray, have alarm systems, and personal safety devices. I have to be in communications with others when I am by myself to negotiate everyday responsibilities that I used to accomplish on my own. When I see the coldness or distance in somebody's eyes, or there are similarities, my heart races and I cannot think. I am so overcome by fear. I cannot walk the dog for blocks at a time. We go a short distance and return inside. My world has become smaller and filled with uncertainty, knowing what can and has happened. Every day is central in my life, thinking, talking, and directing time and energy to try to heal. I grieve and miss who I was before. I question, why me? When was the first time he saw me? When was the moment he decided I was the one to watch? Mine was the window to open. The media sensationalized and graphically related what happened to me, rendering raw wounds over and over for myself and those I love and who love me. I felt vulnerable and exposed. My home was already devastated by the horrors of that night, and the media publicized the location. So close you could see my house. Can you imagine what it was like for my father and mother to hear what they heard, to learn what happened to me? I could not protect them from any of it. The media made certain to, again, take away any privacy or control. My parents became so worried for me, constantly checking on me, afraid of what could be, knowing what has been. The pain and anger and tears expressed since the onset. My sisters and I are in contact daily, trying to reassure that I am safe when I just the need to check reminds us of how unsafe it has been. My children relate to me differently. Each is harmed by the violence that came to me. My friends and colleagues, no one knows how to behave with me, and I am isolated at times by the silence and their uncertainty. My personality has always been positive, light, happy, and engaging, loving and living life. I have become more serious, watchful, angry, even when I try not to dwell on what has transpired. There's a great weight of sadness. I used to enjoy meeting new people, and now I wonder who may hurt me. I viewed men as safe, kind, protective. I look at the world so differently now. In my relationships, it is hard to trust. I don't engage in new situations. I don't care to know new people. I miss being able to trust. I miss feeling safe. I miss taking my dog for a walk. I miss making eye contact with people, saying hello, making conversations, connecting with the world around me. I miss me. So that was my impact statement to the judge before. Thank you. So that was impact statement. Now the things that I would like to talk about is safety. Nobody can make you feel safe except for you. So these are the steps that I have done to make myself safe. Be aware of the surroundings and people around you. Only go places where you know you'll feel safe. I keep keys in my fingers, pepper spray, self-defense pen. This right here is a necklace. It's called Invisaware, and it's programmed to 5 people in my phone. And then if I would press it twice, then they would be alerted if the police needed to come. So it's called Invisaware. I have a safety alarm, a Ring doorbell. I have an awesome dog that doesn't let anything go by. I have a baseball bat by my bed. And one thing I came up with that seems to make me feel comfortable is when I'm in my car at nighttime, I have a baseball cap. And if I didn't feel safe, I would put my hair in a baseball cap, and my silhouette would make me kind of look like a boy. So that is a nice thing. I ended up having to move from my home because of the hit. I had to get a new car. I contacted the local police and informed them. I read safety books. I took a self-defense class, and I have my conceal and carry license, which I have not gotten a gun yet. The next thing I would like to talk about is the healing. I went to counseling from day one, and that was key. Learning to talk. You need to talk about it. If you keep it in, it's going to eat you up. I learned a technique there called EMDR, and that made me talk about it, made me feel like I was hit by a bus, but then you talked about it more and more, and it made me heal. I went to group counseling, and I just learned things there, different, like if you're really anxious while you're sleeping and you just can't sleep, colors mean something. And like fuchsia, to me, I went into the bedroom or my closet and I got a shirt that was fuchsia, and I slept with it, and it calmed me down. Different games that I would play with myself. I'm a flight attendant, so if I was anxious on the airplane, I would pick 10 things that were purple, and I would try to find them, and that made my being anxious go away. It distracted me. I worked out. I went on a trip by myself. I use essential oils with bracelets and diffusers. I listen to meditation music that's relaxing. I ended up having a photo shoot because I wanted to take back me. I wanted to feel pretty again. I wanted to feel sexy. So I needed to do that for me. I was not going to let him win. And that was the key right there, was not letting him win. That's basically it, except for the trial. We had the sentencing. We had the trial. He pleaded guilty. He pleaded to 35 years without parole and 15 years probation. And then we had the sentencing in March. And the judge heard the story. He heard what happened. He heard 3 of my sisters spoke, 1 of my sons spoke, and then I requested to go on the stand. And we have it was on the news, so they ended up taping it for us. But this speech I never wrote down. It was all in my head. And I asked if I could go on the stand and face him, and they let me. And it was the hardest thing in the world you could do, but I let him know I won. Mute.
Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties. I will be getting it right at this moment. Is it? Sorry. Can you come over here? I can't see. Oh, is that it? Yep. Thank you. Oh. I gotta go here and present. Mary Ellen, can you make sure people can hear online when I start it?
Chair in my backyard.
Hoping.
Made the choice to open up my window and slash my screen. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to walk through my home with a half-covered flashlight and a bag of sex toys. You made the choice to stand over me wearing a white mask, leather gloves as you pushed on my face until I could breathe, and a gun to my head. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to say to me, shut up or I'll kill you if you fight me, over and over again. You made the choice to flip me over and tie my arms and my legs behind my back with zip ties. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to steal from me my money, my credit cards, and my belongings. You made the choice to smoke crack cocaine in my home, to suck it in, lay on top of me, blow it into my mouth and tell me to breathe over and over again. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to rape and victimize me for hours. I did not have that choice. But I did have the choice to not let you know my son and my daughter were sleeping upstairs. I had the choice to put my survival mode on and fight like hell. I had the choice to ask you questions and hope to get evidence in case I made it out alive. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to try to hire a man from jail. You made the choice to say no witness, no crime. Michael Burke, yes you Michael Burke, you made the choice to tell him where I lived, what I looked like, where I slept, where I worked, where my adult children live, and where I let my daughter remain. You made the choice. I do not have one, but I do have the choice to heal. And I have the choice to help protect my family, my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. And I also have the choice to help you, Michael Burke. You're an evil, angry bastard behind bars for the rest of your life. So you never touch another female again. Michael Burke, you made your choices. I do not have any. And I pray to you, Judge Wagner, to please keep him in jail, keep him in prison for the rest of his life, so he never victimizes another female, another person again. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for listening to my story. And I just want to say everybody is given obstacles in their life, and how they deal with them makes them who they are today. I am awesome and I love me. So thank you.
Well, that's not a hard act to follow at all. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm Darylyn. I'm a therapist at Mercy Options Behavioral Health Clinic here in Walworth. Long time ago, it seems like now, I was a receptionist at a mental health clinic with my English degree, trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do with it. And I decided that I could do what they were doing. I could do therapy. So I went to grad school, and my very first field placement, so that's where they send all the students to learn the techniques that they taught you in books. My very first client in my very first field placement was in the middle of a psychotic break. And I realized I was way in over my head, but I was just talking to her and I accidentally stumbled into a grounding technique. For those of you that don't know, grounding is what you do when your reality is distorted, whether it's from trauma, high anxiety, those kinds of things. The purple thing that you're talking about on the airplane, that's a grounding technique, when you look for things around you that remind you where you are and that you're safe and you're present. And I stumbled into it completely accidentally and lucked out for her, with her, and watched the other therapists really go to work. And I was hooked. I wanted to be able to walk on those journeys with our clients. So I spent a long time. I realized I needed a lot of training in order to do this work. So that's what I've been doing the last 16 years or so, learning about trauma, learning about its impact. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that trauma certainly is sexual assault and physical assault, and it's a tornado taking your house away. And it's, there's a wide variety of traumas. And it's interesting because I'll get accused of being a witch or a mind reader because I can say what I think the patient, the client, is feeling or thinking. And it's not because I can read minds. It's because even though you've gone through very abnormal situations, you're having a normal response. The symptoms that you have after a trauma are very predictable and normal, and they're not weakness. They're not anything to be ashamed about. They're definitely things that a trauma therapist can help you cope with and learn how to manage. I learned something in one of my seminars, trauma is chaos and healing is structure. So trauma therapy needs to be structured. You need to have a beginning, a middle, an end, and a blueprint, because things feel very chaotic and out of control. They're really not. They were in the moments of the trauma, but the recovery and the trauma response is not out of control. It's very predictable and understandable for people that are educated about it. And I think that's the most important thing to know for yourselves is your therapy is yours. Your voice is yours. If your therapist doesn't help you find your voice, then you need to find a different therapist. If it's not helping and it's not working, it's not your fault. I see a lot of clients who have been maybe to 1 or 2 or 3 different therapists over the course of time. And that's not to say that those therapists weren't good. It's just to say that they didn't have the blueprint that that particular client needed. I'd like to speak for a second on that because it's kind of one of my passions. Is I see a lot of people that have been in treatment and not getting better. And it's because they're not following a blueprint in their therapy. The therapist isn't. Trauma treatment should look like, first of all, learning about trauma. What are the symptoms of PTSD if that's what you have? Not everybody that experiences trauma experiences PTSD. A lot of people do, but not everybody. So learn about trauma, learn about the symptoms, learn about the effect on yourselves. Lynn did a great job of explaining a lot of those things. After you learn, so the first part is psychoeducation. We teach you about trauma and why it's predictable and understandable. The second part are physical strategies. If you're going to a therapist for any kind of trauma and they're not talking to you about working in your body, you're missing half, if not 3/4 of the story. Our bodies keep the score. That's something that Bessel van der Kolk, who is a trauma guru, taught us a long time ago. So most of our trauma memories are not concrete and linear and easy to picture or talk about, but our bodies can tell us. So if you're only doing talk therapy and you're not doing anything physical, you're not fully in trauma therapy. You have to be doing, and it doesn't really matter. It's varied between our clients. It can be yoga, it can be mindfulness, it can be dancing, it can be a lot of different physical activities. It can be stretching, it can be working out, it can be kickboxing, it can be a lot of different things, but we need to learn to get back into our bodies. And then, of course, there's a traditional talk therapy stuff about identifying and expressing feelings. That gets very difficult when you've been told to be quiet or to shut up or you'll die. And it becomes almost impossible to find those words again. But it's not impossible. You just have to work at finding those words and learning how to express them in safe ways. I think the biggest part is changing how you think. When you're victimized, in order to go from victim to survivor to thriver, you have to learn to take the appropriate responsibility for your situation, but not the shame and the blame, and not the responsibility for what was done to you. So if you were abused at the age of 5 and you didn't tell until you were 15, that's okay. You tell when you're safe. I have turtles all over my office. I have turtles, a tattoo, because we only talk when we are safe. We only come out of our shells when we're safe. Whatever that experience is for you, that's fine, and that's beautiful. So don't blame yourself for being quiet if you can't find your voice right away. Then part of this is talking about your trauma narrative. So we will talk about what happened and finding and naming the people that hurt you and naming what they did, because we find that because you've been told to be quiet or you are afraid to speak up, saying people's names, saying what happened becomes kind of like that monster in the closet. If I talk about it, it's going to get me. But really, it's the opposite. The more you talk about it, the easier it gets, the better it gets for you. And that could take a lot of different paths. I do narrative therapy, meaning like we talk through the story and we talk about how you're thinking about it, how you're feeling about it. We do grounding during those sessions. There's a lot of techniques. EMDR is another great example of a technique. Working through your story combines coping with your physical symptoms, all the stuff that I just talked about, not just robotic. I think people up here who have worked with victims can understand that when people first start telling what happened to them, they sound like a robot. Flat face, not a lot of emotion. It's because they're holding it all in, because they're feeling like they're breaking inside. So telling your story is part of the thing, but it's really about feeling your story. Again, the body work while we're talking about this stuff. And then sharing your story with your support system. You don't live with your therapist, probably a good thing according to my husband, but you don't live with your therapist, so you want your support system to know your story, because again, it's not your shame and it's not your blame. So you don't keep it a secret. You don't have to keep it a secret. And any of us listening to Lynn can understand she shouldn't keep it a secret, because what she shares with us allows other people to know that it's okay to talk about it too. And then the final part of trauma therapy is future planning and safety planning, because unfortunately, especially a lot of our kids who have been traumatized are complex trauma people, that multiple traumas over a course of time. They tend to have difficulty setting boundaries and finding ways to feel and be safe. So we talk a lot about how to do that. And again, none of this is specific to sexual abuse. It speaks to all different kinds of trauma. Certainly sexual abuse is one of those things. I alluded to Bessel van der Kolk. The Body Keeps the Score is a really good resource. I'll warn you, if you pick it up at the library, it's about this thick and really wordy, but it has a lot of really good information. But another book is Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma, a workbook for survivors and therapists by Janina Fisher. Janina Fisher worked with Dr. van der Kolk, and she did an awesome job of making a little baby workbook that's really accessible to all of us. It has worksheets, has assignments, and what she did, which I think is genius, is she made it so that you could do it on your own or you could do it with a therapist. I think that, yeah, sure. It's called Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma, a workbook for survivors and therapists by Janina, Janina, Fisher. Oh, Janina, Janina, Fisher. FISHER. Got it? I know I talk fast, especially when I'm nervous, and I'm nervous. So, she did a really good job. So that's a good workbook to start with. And it's also a great workbook to use with your therapist. I have it. I highly recommend it with all my clients because, again, you don't live with us. That trauma therapy can be once a week. It can be several times a week, but you have to go home. So having resources at home to help ground you and help remind you of the strategies can be invaluable. There's a lot of apps out there that you can use, different meditation apps, different mindfulness apps, different relaxation apps. I never recommend one particular app because everybody's different and we all like and use different things. The one that I do suggest to try first is called Headspace. And it's a mindfulness meditation app. And what I really love about it is that it has probably 60 to 90 second mindfulness meditation exercises. So they're not those super long where you sit there and you listen to a voice going on and on, which can be really useful for people. But people that have been traumatized tend to need a lot more quick things at first because sitting for 30 minutes with their own thoughts does not feel very comfortable for them. So I really like the short burst ones. I love them for anybody with anxiety. I use it on my own phone. It sets a reminder for you. Goes off, you can go off to up to 5 times a day, I think, to remind you just to take a moment and breathe and do one of those exercises. It starts to teach you what your body feels like relaxed because we forget. I think so. The last thing I think that I wanted to talk a little bit about is why did I do this today? I clearly hate public speaking. I get really nervous. It's not my forte, but I think it's so important what people are doing here today. I think that there are many resources out here in our community. And, you know, I don't know how many of you knew Mr. Rogers when you were growing up. He was like an integral part of my world. And there's a great story about him, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. He said that when he was a little child, he would get very afraid of things that were going on in the world. And his mom told him, yeah, there are bad things that happen in the world, but look, watch what comes next. The helper people. Bad things happen to good people, but there are always going to be helper people. Look for us. Don't stop looking for us. We're all out here. And all we want to do is give you the opportunity to find us. So that's why I came out of my comfort zone today. So I hope that that's helpful. And I'm going to pass it off to Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I got it. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I had myself muted. My name is Kathy. I could save a life. I'm licensed to save a life. I could write a prescription.
She's on. You're
There
on.
we go. Oh, no. Thank you. Sorry, guys, for the technical. My name is Kathy Duco-Cross. I am the SANE coordinator. SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner, but we've also made that transition to Forensic Nurse Examiner. And the reason being is because as a sexual assault nurse examiner, yes, we see victims of violence, but we also do other parts of the forensics. You know, we can handle the drug endangered children. Are you guys familiar with those in the area? Rock County and Walworth County had quite a few years ago. So we do see dead kids. We work closely with the treehouse, especially after hours. And sexual assault, human trafficking, domestic violence, strangulation. These are all the areas that we have now, along with our community partners, because we can't do what we do if it wasn't for the support of our community. And the other thing that's important is we couldn't do what we do if the patients who came to us didn't trust us. We talk about exams. We talk about, you know, the bottom line is that we couldn't control, nor could that patient control what happened to him or her. And I say him and her because we do know that men are victims as well, but very rarely will a man come forward. So that's something that we're really trying to break in as well. But we couldn't control that. That patient didn't deserve it. You didn't deserve it. Usually when we go out and speak, to in the communities as well as other areas, one of the first things that I'll say is that you may hear things that stir something in you, right? That all of a sudden, a thought that comes into your head that you haven't thought about in 30 years or 20 years or something. Many times I've had past victims come up and talk to me and say, hey, can I talk to you? Absolutely. And then what do we do at that point? At that point, then we work with our wonderful community partners. We reach out and then we actually help get them the assistance that they need. Because you know what? Trauma, as you said, perfect, is that you don't necessarily get to pick it, not that any of us would, but what do we do when it happens to us, right? So that's because we're going to give you the support that you need. Because one thing that I know we all agree on is that we are not going to allow that to define you. That's not going to define you. It didn't define my friend right there. All y'all are my friends, so you just don't know it. But it didn't define Lynn. And look at that. And I love Lynn's story. I met Lynn at one of the events that we were speaking at, and I was just immediate in awe of her. Now I'm losing my voice. My kids are going to be happy. But, that's what's really important. But the other thing is that one of the things is we're really trying to branch off into the schools, right? Because I have a question for you all. What's the drinking age in the state of Wisconsin? 21. So if my kids are watching, I'm going to call you out right now. But I would love to tell you that my kids were the perfect kids and never went to a high school party. Would that be a lie? If they're watching, I got it. It's true, right? But now all of a sudden you have yourself in that situation where you may have drank alcohol and now something happens. What are you going to do? What do you think our kids are going to do? Do you think they're going to come forward? Why? Why do you think they won't come forward? Oh, yeah. It can be, or maybe that they're afraid of getting a ticket. Are the cops going to get called on them? And so things like this are so important for us to get out there and do the education to say, you know what, I will tell you, I've done a lot of cases, and at no time did a person under the age of the drinking age ever get a ticket if it's related to a sexual assault. So we want to get that education out there to our kids, because we want them to know that this does not define them. It doesn't define us as humans. You know what does define us is what are we going to do tomorrow? What kind of services and support do you need from us? I get calls all the time. I got a call, matter of fact, about 1:00 this afternoon. And I apologize for being late because I was on a case, so I'm sorry. And my hair doesn't normally look this bad. So you could block that out on the camera. But, the thing is that it doesn't define. And so I have people call often to say, you know what, Kathy, this is not a sexual assault. No, this is not a domestic violence. No, it's not a strangulation. I just need help. That's fine, because guess what? And we get on the phone and we really rally our community. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't know. Do you know that you can still get services from an event that happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Did you know that? Because what happens sometimes with victims? They get stuck. Would you agree? The world keeps going, but they get stuck. Would you agree with that, Lynn? Yeah, they do. So that's why we say, you know what? We're here. We are strong. We're going to help you, and we'll help you with any of the resources that you have. Just let us know. So, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity. Can we give them a round of applause and the people on the line or online? Because you know what, without you, this would not be possible. So I really do want to say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Thank you for not complaining about the snow, because I've done it enough today. Thank you just for being here. So thanks. And thanks, guys.
There you go. Perfect. Folks, I do actually want to introduce you to Erin. She came in a little bit later because she was working on a case, and I'm going to let her speak for a little bit.
You're all set. Perfect. Okay, so I just want to apologize again for showing up late. I was actually with Kathy on the call, so that happened at 1 o'clock. My name is Erin, and I'm the Child Teen Advocate at New Beginnings. I'm sure, right away in the beginning, you guys heard a little bit about the services that New Beginnings offers. Primarily, my role is to be an extra set of eyes and ears for our youth. And I am so glad that Kathy mentioned getting out into the schools. I cannot tell you guys how important that is to me, to get out into these schools, to branch out and, just express that this stuff happens. This stuff is going on. Our kids are getting involved in different social media platforms. Our kids are, it takes one click and another click, and next thing you know, they're involved in a sex trafficking case. They don't have the resources and tools that they think they have. And for me, it's just my role is to just bring that awareness and that, that light to them and just help guide them, not to take the parents' role, over the parents' role, but just to be an extra person they can go to, because not a lot of kids like Kathy mentioned, want to come forward about these things. It's so much easier to talk to a teen advocate, somebody, I know I'm a little bit younger, but somebody who is close in their age, somebody who understands them. So that's mainly my main role. And again, educators, if there's anybody, online that's watching, I really, really strongly would love to stress the importance of getting into our local schools, whether it be in Walworth County or, in Jefferson County, but really get involved and bring awareness to, not just sexual assault, but domestic violence, harassment, the human trafficking, all these different components. They need to come to light. And a lot of our older generations still feel like this stuff doesn't happen. And that's the biggest thing that I keep hearing from administration is we don't have this problem. And we don't have this problem. We don't need you until we do have this problem and we do need you. I'm working because of confidentiality. I can't say a whole lot, but right now I'm working, a pretty big sex trafficking case with a couple minors. And now I have schools left and right saying, hey, can you come in and speak? Can you come in and talk? Can you give us this prevention? And, it's almost the end of the school year, guys. Like I would love to have had this before, so maybe this wouldn't have become a problem. So in all aspects, I love everybody here talking. Again, I apologize for being super late, but I was with a 3-year-old. It happens to all ages, all kinds. And I love my job. I love, making the awareness. I love doing the groups. Again, just being there for everybody. So thank you guys for showing up and being here. And thank you, Lynn, again, for telling your story. This is the second time or third time now that I've been able to listen to Lynn talk, and every time she hits me. So she's amazing. And thanks everybody here for being here. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. All right, so now it is question time. So does anybody in the audience have any questions for the panel? Yes.
A question for Liz. You talked about the fact that one of your sons was in the house, and as parents, we're all used to being the person who's in charge and helping our kids. What was that like for you, and what has it been like for you to have your children be?
Okay. Heidi wanted to know how it was for my kids to help me through this journey, and they were awesome. Each one of them handled it differently. I have a son that's in LA, so he did a lot of, the other stuff. But my middle son had, I have grandchildren, so he would always say, here, take Noah, tried to distract me. My son that was home, he's he's been my rock because he's there. And, you know, we talk about it all the time. He was going through the Milwaukee Fire Department cadet program at the time, and it was so hard for him, but he still did it. And you know, when it was the hitman part, they put us in protective custody in a hotel downtown Milwaukee, and his teachers, his instructors didn't even know that he was living someplace else besides home, because he showed how strong he was and all. But he was for me, you know, he slept in the same bed with me for months. I had a king size bed with my dog, but he, you know, they all were troopers. And I still remember the day. It was the day before the sentencing. I said, "Luke, you seem a little sad today." I said, "Are you okay?" He looked at me and he says, "Mom, you saved my life." And I looked at him and I grabbed him by the cheeks. I said, "Luke, you saved mine." So it's been a journey for all of us. Each one of them helps in different ways. And that's what makes me as strong as I am. I have the support of my family, my friends. It's unbelievable. The counseling, it's, you know, I wouldn't be where I am now without it. So did that answer you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Sure, thank you.
Daisy. Yeah, I'm sorry. Audrey and Daisy. Audrey and Daisy.
So the question from the audience was, when Susie spoke earlier, the very first speaker, she spoke of a documentary, and it was, what was the name of it?
Audrey and Daisy.
Audrey and Daisy.
Question for therapist. Thank you.
Yeah, is it okay if I talk?
The body may not, or may not remember the trauma like it would, but the body remembers. In your experience and in your practice, do you find that a lot of people come with, "I can't remember the specific person," or "I can't remember the specific date, but every time I think of this person, or have this memory, it does, you know, feel."
Okay, so the question was about the body keeping the score, and if I have had clients that come to me and say that they can't remember a specific person or a specific date or necessarily the details,
Right.
but when they think of the person or an event, a time, they get the you feel like the,
Yeah.
you know, creepy, icky feeling, as I say to my kiddos. Yeah, I mean, it's repressed memory was back in the day, and that's a little different situation. I don't know all about that, but a lot of times, and I think you can speak a little bit more to our court cases, you know, it's very difficult because trauma survivors will say, well, I can't get on court and testify because I don't know the details. I can't tell the story from beginning to end to the middle. And trauma memory, you know, your brain does a wonderful service to you when you're experiencing a trauma. It allows you to dissociate a little bit. It allows you, hopefully, to not be as present in order to survive. The problem with that is, as you can imagine, it's not stored very well. And trauma memories, I frequently, back in the day when you used to club or things like that, the strobe lights, right? It's a lot more like that. It's flashing. And so a lot of our work is figuring out, well, when is that creepy, icky feeling happening? And who is that around? And a lot of what we talk about in order to identify triggers is what was happening just before you started feeling that. Who were, you know, the who, what, where, when, and why. So who were you around? What were you doing? What were you smelling? What were you hearing? What were you tasting? What were you seeing? Because our memories, all memories, are stored through your five senses. And very frequently our triggers are not sight, they're other senses. Smells are big. Textures can be big. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, but then on the same for the court aspect,
I will. Yeah, and the follow-up question was regarding how does this affect a prosecution and the ability to hold the offender accountable if the victim cannot remember all the specifics. And that is a big issue. It is a big concern, especially early on when we're trying to build the case to even get it to court. I'm guessing that there are a lot of times where we can't do it, and that it's heartbreaking, you know, but there are times when there's just enough. And with the support of therapists and counselors, you know, you get a little bit more and you get a little bit more. And by the time something would go to court, hopefully you have the big enough picture to bring to a jury to see it. And there comes education as well. We will often bring on therapists and, you know, someone from New Beginnings to address, well, this is why they don't know the details. This is why this is out of order and nobody can remember exactly what happened when, but it happened. So it's tricky. I will agree. And I know you understand that, but it's something that we just have to work for every day, trying to build that case and to make it stronger and hopefully get the victim in a place where they can testify as much as they can and just go from there. You know, I wish I had it's always perfect. It's not, you know, it's just not.
And I could just add to that too. The other thing that we have to remember is that many years ago, if a patient or person would change their story, did that have people thinking that that would change their credibility, right? And you guys hit the nail right on the head with trauma. They may not remember it. Or many times, and what we tell victims is that, you know what, it's okay to not remember. It's okay if you think it's this way now, but then all of a sudden they get a flash and they're like, nope, it was like that. Our society, especially Walworth County, amazing, really understands that trauma part of it to the brain, and you get fantastic. I mean, I'm seriously going to move to Walworth County. Sorry, Racine County. But I mean, no, and it is true, because if somebody changes their story, does that change that credibility? And now they've got the science and the knowledge, a fantastic job of really understanding that trauma, because your mind has to try to figure it out, right? Before they can discuss it. So just a wonderful job.
One thing I would like to say as well, when I went in for my SANE exam right after, there were so many things that I had said and I didn't remember. So one of the healing things that I wanted to do is I wanted to see my report. I wanted to see what might be different than in my head than what happened there. And they didn't really want me to do it because they thought it was going to be traumatizing for me, and it was. But it was also healing at the same time. And there was so many things that I said at that time that I didn't remember. But reading it, was like, oh my God. Oh my God, you know, so it's true what, you know, the trauma you go through. And so, okay.
Yes, absolutely. So trauma, I'm sorry. So she, audience member asked if that strobe light effect of memory happens with all kinds of trauma, and the answer is yes. Trauma overwhelms us. So what we define as trauma, I have a handy definition here. Trauma is not specific to sexual assault. So trauma is defined as an event where you or someone you care about experience actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. And trauma response is for all of that and more. So anything that, and I want to say that you could have 3 people go through the same event, tornado hitting a house, and not everybody is going to have the same experience of it. A lot of how we are affected by trauma depends on our foundation at first, who we were before the event happened. But it also a lot depends on who we are after. But yes, so to answer your question, the stromal effect is not specific to sexual assault. It's any kind of trauma. Sure. So why does our mind do the flashing kind of thing? It has to do with our brains being protective. I frequently say this to my clients and they look at me like I'm crazy, but it's true. Our brains know better than we do. It's not, our conscious only has a limited amount of information, but our brains are designed to keep us alive and protect us. And so when things get too big or too much, it kind of tunes in and out. Think of it more like a cell phone that keeps dropping reception. So you don't always get all the detail. In one moment, it's like 100% detailed to the, this color of the floor and everything else. And the next moment, it's nothing. Our brains are pretty miraculous. And I don't want to geek out and go into all the science, but it's pretty cool that all of the trauma symptoms are adaptive and they have purpose. They're not weakness. You're not broken or anything like that. They all have purpose. My job isn't to fix a trauma survivor. My job is to walk on their journey of healing. There's a difference. So all of those symptoms are consistent across the board. And not everybody has every symptom, but yeah. Does that answer that question? Okay.
Hi, this is for Lynn.
I believe Alice has a question that she would like to ask. So we're going to see if technology works with us.
Yes, I'm wondering, can you hear me? Okay, great. This is for Lynn. I just want to know if you can enlighten the group as to the process of the trial, how long it took, the verdict, and the
Alice, unfortunately, we can't hear you. Can you type your question in the chat? I do apologize.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Try one more time. Try one more time.
Alice, do you want to try one more time asking?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Unfortunately, Alice, the technology is being a little bit persistent. If you can type your question, that would be great. I do apologize.
Okay, let me see. Where do I type it?
So the question that was asked is that what do you do when you have a patient who's a person who's a victim of physical or abuse, but doesn't want to pursue or come forward, right? Yeah. Okay. I will just speak briefly on that because that's our advocates, that's their specialty. But honestly, it's support. They need to feel safe. And once we have those resources in place, that does assist. And then I will turn it over down there.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with what Kathy's saying. It's really about that support and listening. You don't want to pressure them if they're not ready to receive that help. So it's really important to just be super supportive. And not only that, but you let them know about the resources out there. Connect them, casually drop the numbers, but it's really about that support. Just talking, maybe encourage them for counseling. We do, our services are free. They can call up. It can be totally anonymous. We don't have to know who's calling. So, your friend or whoever it is, you can have them call us and just talk to the advocate who answers the phone. If they've got questions, there's no pressure whatsoever. But the key is that support, letting them know that, this, it's not okay. This isn't the way a healthy relationship is, and kind of guiding them gently, because you don't want to force anything or you're going to scare them off. They're not going to talk to you. They're not going to confide in you anymore. So it's all about that support and listening. Overall, it's the biggest thing you can do.
I think I would just like to add to Stephanie, I agree, definitely support, resources, tools. For me, especially with children and teens, more so teens, just listen what they have to say. If they want to talk 10 minutes about their day at school, or, whatever, about the sky being blue and the grass being green, cool. Let's sit and talk for 10, 20 minutes about that. But building that trust and giving them the resources that they have by listening and being there for them, I think is the most important, and guiding them to the right place and getting them, where they should be. Even though we feel like we know what they need, they may not be aware of that yet. And just being there for them might just be enough to give them that little push or that shove that they need.
And I think it's also important to remember that they may not even realize what's abuse. A lot of people live with it for so long that this is just a regular Tuesday. It's not, I can't believe this happened to me. It's like, I remember speaking with one of my victims over the phone, and she said, I'm no victim. I know what to do. I just cover my head when he's hitting. He stops. And this was just fact. It wasn't, I don't know what to do to help myself. It was like, this is just normal life. Leave me alone. So you got to recognize where they are and where their mindset is while you're trying to figure out how to guide them in the right direction as well. Because the last thing you want to do is not be supportive in the way they need you to be supportive at that moment. It doesn't mean it can't change. It just means right then, right now, right this minute, I'm going to help you the best way I can without pushing you farther away. Does that make sense? I'm not a counselor. I'm deferring to you guys.
No, I'm not a counselor.
Well, and if I could just add a little bit to that. So sometimes when patients come in who have been raped and they're over the age of 18, they have a right to whether or not they want to report. Our victims have, technically it's 10 years. We tell our victims it's 9.5, because then if they change their mind, which they can, and they do at times, that then once they notify the police department, then the police department has to notify the crime lab, and then the crime lab has to test the kits. And so, we need that 6-month period. But it's the same, it's the same thing. It's that, what we offer that support, because people they can't control what happened to them, but they do get a say. And so it's about that support and about our resources. And, if they're under the age of 18 and a victim of, for example, a sexual assault, the laws are somewhat different, but again, it's still that person's, it's still their exam. Does that make sense? Yeah.
From the home IX, Lynn, a question about the timetable in terms of that legal process. What was that timetable like? And what was
they wanted to know what the timetable was from the process. So when it was a few months, he wanted the trial in 90 days, but he kept on ending up postponing it. So the assault was June 1st of 2017. The trial was January 29th of 2018. The sentencing was March 22nd of 2018. So he's been in jail ever since. So
how was all of that to manage all of that time?
How was that to manage that for me? It was hard, but going through the process of trying to heal, and my whole thing was not letting him win. Through the things, like I said, I was doing things to take back me, but a lot of times I'd go, 2 steps forward and 5 steps backwards. But like I said, I've had so much support, and it did, going through counseling, talking, it made me, feel like it wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything to make him do this to me. I never even met him. Didn't even see his face. But in that process, it was hard. It was hard.
Is there any other questions? Yes, Mary Ellen.
For therapists probably and New Beginnings, in terms of young people and dating and relationships and partner relationships, we're talking recently about healthy relationships and where those relationships can go and how they work. Healthy relationships and learning about what's a healthy relationship and what's a more controlling relationship or an unhealthy relationship. Can you speak to that, including what kind of services or groups or things that you might have at New Beginnings? How one tends to lead.
So the question was more so just to kind of combine it all together, was about healthy relationships and how we kind of discuss that and bring groups or presentations going forward with healthy relationships. So what I do now, I am currently in a couple schools. Because of COVID, it's made it a little difficult to get into the schools and do these groups, but I do roughly a 6 to 8 week course with students. And I kind of just go over all that, because healthy relationships is kind of a big topic. Underneath the healthy relationship topic, I go over, stress and anxiety one week. I go over just little things that make up it, I guess, little pieces to the puzzle of the whole healthy relationship umbrella. And just discuss, because I feel like you can't have a healthy relationship with someone if you don't have all of those pieces together, or you're not aware of what all of those pieces are. And I'm sure, our therapist can kind of add to that as well. But my job as an advocate is to kind of make sure these kiddos are aware of these different components. My favorite tool that I use with these kids is called the Power Control Wheel. And I know Stephanie uses these with the adults as well. There is a teen version, and then there's also the adult version. It basically is a wheel that explains how people can have control over you and how they can manipulate you. And I think more teens need to see this wheel, because I think it'll affect the way they look at friendships and relationships going forward. How people are more controlling than they think, how, abusive that their friend who's always wanting them to go places with them and they never get to speak up. Having that consent talk with them. That consent is not just about the sexual content. Consent can be simply as everybody has, one person has a pack of gum and everybody wants this, a piece of this pack of gum. And being okay to say no to handing it out to a certain person or to several people. I think a lot of teens feel that immediate pressure on a lot of different things. And That's just a small component of, the healthy relationships groups. New Beginnings also does offer, so it's not just in the schools, and I'm currently trying to work in getting that set up with COVID rules starting to lift a little bit more and more as people get vaccinated, groups in our building. So I do run groups, with the youngers. So I'm talking, the 5, 6, 8-year-old kids. And then, our middle school age and then our high school age. So it's covered in preventative with all of ages. And I know Stephanie, with her sexual assault groups, I'm sure that's something that also gets brought up.
I'll just piggyback on that for 1 second. I think what she just brought up is super important. If you're waiting until you have teens to talk about healthy relationships, you're really waiting too long. Healthy relationships start early, birth. And I'm not talking about like overwhelming a kid, but for example, and this is not a popular one with my clients, but if a grandma wants a hug and a kid says no, the kid says no. We have to teach our adults around our children to let them set and maintain their own boundaries, because boundaries are the key to healthy relationships in any relationship. What our perpetrators do is they slowly turn up the heat a lot of times. It's that old adage, right? With you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly turn the heat up, the frog will die because it doesn't notice the change. You put a frog in a boiling pot of water, it jumps out. We want our kids and our people to know that it's boiling water. So we have to start really early.
I have a quick general question that Ellen had this whole discussion of unfolding in our healthy relationships with another. How do we then bring this content and continue to update our school's book curriculum, knowing these kids are all struggling at some level, not understanding healthy relationships and boundaries? What do we have to do as a community to, see curriculum changes yet again? But it seems like health curriculum is always under review. There's so much that can be covered, and I know there's so much that has to be done at home, and there's so much that has to be close to the community. But this was a great one, especially for the youth. So how do you get more kids?
Well,
to the schools? Content like you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess just to reiterate the question is how do we bring this awareness to the community? How do we have more of me? I feel like this is and Stephanie knows, the day-to-day struggle that I have. Especially social media, like you mentioned, it is becoming more and more prevalent in our kids' lives. I have a 7-year-old at home, and he's constantly on YouTube and Minecraft and things. I mean, of course I monitor, but at the same time, you can't monitor everything. And being able to go into the schools in talking to administration, the biggest, and not to knock anybody, because I don't want to talk negatively about anybody, but the biggest problem I fear and see is we're all under that assumption that this doesn't happen here. We are a good old boys town. We are a good old boys county. None of this happens. This is, in the Chicago, Detroit, all these big city areas. It's here. It's here. It's in our counties. It's in our schools. It's in our homes. We can't prevent any of this stuff completely, but we can certainly talk to our kids and talk to our youth and show them that, this stuff, I guess, just make them aware that this stuff can happen. The child sex trafficking case that I mentioned earlier, it's these kids are as young as 11 years old. I mean, that's a wake-up call. My daughter turns 11 next month. I can't imagine her being in that position. And if anybody at home has kids, if you guys have children, think about that. Think 11 years old. I'm sure most of us here, when we were 11, that was not even a topic we wanted to talk about. We were, running in a different room because it was so embarrassing. You know, we were all talking about, oh, we had to have this talk in class about puberty, like ew. And now they're taking pictures and they're sending videos, and, you know, just, I guess not to go back to the question is, we need more community members to, I guess, go to school board meetings or, you know, just bring that awareness like, hey, this is here. I know it's a sensitive topic, and I'm sure there's a lot of, you know, parent feedback, because a lot of parents don't want their child to hear this stuff. They don't want to have them, you know, learn about this stuff now because they want to keep their innocence. Well, guess what? Your kid may not be as innocent as you think. And we're not going to figure that out, you know, until we talk about it and have that open discussion. And, you know, it's hard. It's very hard.
Model it to death. Opportunities to society are healthy, reflecting back at them. So her ability to reach out to other healthy playmates at 17,
right.
They don't exist.
Right.
It's very difficult. She's currently going through suicide watch, and she's owing too much responsibility. She had no idea what this world looked like or what he was going through, and she's taking it on. And I'm trying to figure out how to support her through a friendly crisis.
Like this young woman here, you see people that are really, you know, so these teenagers are dealing with more and more heavy world stuff. And then what are we modeling for them? We can only switch at home and again, like the communities here to do the services, obviously,
right.
Just keep growing. Right to elementary school, we're so great about modeling friendship group stuff. They're so little. And then you get to middle school and it's a free-for-all. So we almost have to like rattle back to, you know, those groups need to be ongoing, their ability to navigate
right
social world. So again,
no, and I'm so sorry that your friend is, or your daughter is dealing with that with her friend. That's tough. It is, and unfortunately, with and I don't want to talk too long because I don't know how long we all want to stay. But with social media and I mean, our cell phones, these devices are constantly on us. We have the world in our hand 24/7. And my husband will, you know, probably laugh at me for saying this, but it's like, we never leave our phones. And these kids, they're spending 8, 9, 12 hours a day on their phone. They're not going to bed on the right time because they're on TikTok, they're on Snapchat, whichever social media platform. It's just, I think as parents, we need to be aware of what these apps do, make awareness to parents, maybe have parent groups more to learn about different apps and learn about these different things, and then turn around and have parents teach kids. And I understand that it's hard because not a lot of parents are able to do that. So that's where coming into the school and having those groups, you know, it's there for them. The parents don't have to, you know, bring that, you know, that component in, but definitely keeping an eye on what your kids are doing on a regular basis is so crucial to these kids.
Anybody else would like to share? Yes.
So, yes, anybody.
I'll just speak just a little bit because I feel like I've been talking quite a bit. I don't want to take it away from everybody else. For me, I don't feel like, oh, I'm sorry. So the question was, you know, what age is too little, or when is it appropriate to start having these conversations with the kiddos? For me, there's no age. There's no age limit. You as a parent and as a mom know your child the best. If yes, society will probably tell you shouldn't be talking about sexual assault with an 8-year-old. But if you know your child is able to handle that content and you're modifying it enough where the graphic details aren't too much for your child to handle, and you're having that open communication with them, then that's appropriate. That's what you need to have. My daughter, I watched a case from Bark. It's a parent app. I watched a video with her the other day, I should say this weekend, on how quick social media can be changed and how quick predators can get to you through those social media apps. She was, of course, like, Mom, why are we watching this? But at the end, I think she took away from it that this is why Mom's telling me, no, you can't have Snapchat at 11 years old. So I guess you know your child the best. You know how to bring up topics with them. And I think most importantly, children will come to you if they have questions. They will ask you. And I know that sounds so like, really? Like, she's not coming to me now, but don't give them information if they're not asking, and because you don't want to alter anything. And I think maybe our therapist can kind of relate to that more than I can, but I think that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think with kids, young kids in particular, the elementary school or even a little bit younger, it's really about planting seeds and watering. You're not going to sit down and have an intense conversation about this stuff, but you can plant a seed. You read your kid, know what's too much. If anybody tells you that they're the expert on your kid, tell them they're full of it, because you are. And so you listen to your kid. But I think the important thing is opening that door of communication and letting them know it's okay to talk about. They're not going to come. They will come to you with a lot of questions, but they're probably not going to say, hey, Mom, what's rape? But if they're starting to talk about things like, so-and-so has a friend and he's really mean and bullying, you can use that as a conversation of boundary setting and what's okay to, and that's the start of this conversation. And that's what I said earlier, that if you're waiting till high school to talk about healthy relationships, it's not all about sex. It's about healthy boundaries and relationships in general. So listen to your kid and keep the door open. The car is a great place because they're kind of trapped and they can't run from you, which they'll want to do. But, again, little short bursts of information that's age appropriate. I really strongly, I don't know if other people have this issue, but using weird names for private parts and things like that. No, teach your kids the right names. It's not going to freak them out. That's what they're called. And that way they know them. One of my hardest things as a therapist is a mom will come in with a kid or a dad and say, I think somebody touched my kid in their privates because he keeps saying that. And so we do all this stuff, to try to figure it out because I can't lead them into making a disclosure. And it turns out that somebody told the kid that, a bare belly is a private. And and then the opposite. They don't know what the private is and they don't know that it's not okay to touch. So having them have that basic information goes a long way. And I'll second what everybody said, which is social media is awesome, but it's like opening the front door to your house. It's unlocking all your windows. Everything in the world comes in. So we have to be very careful about what our kids are on. And let me tell you, as soon as I learn what's going on in one app, they develop another app. So we need to stay on top of it too. Could you hurt your kid by saying too much? In the conversation, you mean?
Like, per se, they were totally not aware.
Yeah.
Something. You were just making them very, hey, what's going on? This is going to happen. He looks at me like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I did too much.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? I'm the one traumatizing her.
So I guess it depends on what you mean by too much. I wouldn't go into graphic detail, but I would say, you know, depending on your kid's age, think about what their, so I'll get therapy for a second. Developmental stages are all different, right? So what are your kids' developmental stage? So if you have a kid that's in kindergarten, you know, they're figuring out how to tie their shoes instead of the Velcro. So you're not going to want to go into a lot of detail, but you can say something about don't ever let anybody push you around or tell you that, you know, they can do something if you tell them no. So it's kind of dependent on what stage of development and where those kids are at. And personally, as a therapist, I can certainly help you untraumatize your kid from a rough conversation a lot easier than something horrible happening and then we have to. So keeping that line of communication and that support and reading your kid. If they're starting to get really squirrely, then you're probably going a little too far. You know, beside normal kids squirrely, like mom's talking to me and I don't want to hear it. But if they're starting to ask questions that indicate that they're afraid of what you're talking about, you can kind of back off a little bit. Does that make sense?
Oh, oh God. Okay, I did it right. And I just wanted to add something to that too, because one of the things that we always talk about with parents is I had a conversation with my granddaughter. I think it was Sunday morning, and she said, "Grandma," she said, "wouldn't you want to be a kid now? Like back when you were a kid, such and such happened." And I had to correct her because I am not as old as Dirta. I'm close, but I'm not that old. But, you know, and I said to her, I said, honestly, no, I don't. And I said, because being a kid today is really hard. I mean, it's really, really hard. And social media, horrible. I mean, these people are coming into the homes. The other thing that is so important is that do our kids, and we have to recognize this, do our kids like us every single second of the day? No. Do we like our kids every single second of the day? No. But do we love them? We always love them. And that is something that we have to reinstill into them, no matter what they do. And I used to tell my kids all the time, my daughter is 30. And I said, you know what? I didn't like you did that, but I still love you. And they need to know that, because with that, then that also builds that trust to say, you know what? My mom's going to get mad, but I know she still loves me, so I can come and talk to her. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Well, we kind of went over tonight, but I'm glad that we did because we had a great conversation. I want to thank New Beginnings, the District Attorney's Office, Mercy and Aurora, and Lynn for being vulnerable and educating people tonight and having these tough conversations that we want to have every day. As an audience member said tonight or asked tonight, how do we get this out? How do we talk about it? This is the first step. And I want to share with the viewers online and the people here in the audience, if you have suggestions or want insight on how to start these tough conversations, please reach out to me and we can start right here in our schools, in our community, with community members that are very passionate about what they do and they want to share. They want to break this down because in the long run, it's doing that preventative medicine that we all need to have. Just like our cars, we have to have oil changes, we have to have tires rotated. You know what? That goes with ourselves personally. And in that, next month is our mindfulness in conversation. So make sure to register for that. It speaks about mental health. It speaks about the physical health, what we're feeding into our bodies, and our faith. So in that, thank you very much on behalf of the Resiliency Coalition and In Conversation. Thank you all panelists for being vulnerable, sharing your stories and your education. Be healthy, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good night.